Good day, thank you for joining me today on my YouTube channel. Of course, we're going to be talking about Sasquatch today. I've got a really cool video from Pennsylvania that we're going to analyze. And we're going to talk about some communications, tactile. We've got some really amazing, incredible encounter that I don't really like talking about. It's a very paranormal kind of strange experience, so we're going to get into that. I'm going to have my buttons pushed, so let's get into this episode. Here we go.
I've taken out dozens of wildlife officers, PhDs, and had them live interact with Sasquatch on multiple occasions. Trained in the art of tracking by a Cree Nation's elder and a military sniper, my skill sets include camouflage techniques using the terrain and its features to mask ground movement, counter surveillance, survival, evasion, and escape techniques.
So since Sasquatch are primates, higher primates, I do a lot of comparisons to what's known about known primates, and specifically gorillas, chimpanzees, and not so much orangutans, maybe bonobos, and actually not even bonobos, because they're very female-dominated society, and I'm quite convinced, I'm significantly, horrifically, tremendously convinced that Sasquatch are male-dominated societies, so gorillas and chimpanzees, and even leaning more towards gorillas. But what's really interesting about primates, gorillas and chimpanzees, is they're groups that are devoted to one another, and their forms of communication, which is what I want to focus on today, are an enormously broad range, from tactile to visual to vocal to olfactory. So it's really it's amazing how they'll take, especially being primates, there's so many levels at which they can communicate, and that's really important when moving forward with this discovery, because we need to know that we're dealing with intelligent beings that have so many ways to communicate that when we're interacting with them, and when anybody interacts with Sasquatch, you have to be in the wilderness. Human beings in society, we're used to loud noises, we're used to hearing lots of stuff going on. We just let sounds go, but it's not like that in the wilderness. In the wilderness, everything that happens for a very specific reason. Trees don't just generally fall and collapse on their own. Booming sounds and all these things that we take for granted, the Sasquatch and animals in the wilderness don't. Every little sound is so significant. I remember talking, you might remember this from the episode of Survivor Man that I was in. There's not one single sound that we can't just let it go. We can't just go, well, that was a booming sound over there, don't worry about it. We have to deduce what it is, even for survival purposes. Was that a bear? Was that a mountain lion? Was that wolves? Was that a big moose charging at us? And once you practice and get good at recognizing particular sounds, animals, especially in the North American wilderness, are very predictable. Bears make a very specific sound when they run because they're large and they have soft feet, as compared to a deer or an elk or a moose, which you can branch into. That's an ungulate moving through the wilderness. And when you hear specific sounds for antlers, you know that you're talking about the thick, heavy antlers of a moose or an elk. So sounds are tremendously significant, and as human beings, we're just not used to living that kind of lifestyle. So we're going to talk a little bit about vocalizations and sounds and whatnot in this episode. But first, we're going to get into, I just love it when I get uncomfortable. So I'm going to combine, normally I do a segment on the question from the cooperation, and the art of Sasquatch. So I'm just going all into the art of Sasquatch today with a very uncomfortable subject, but I'm going to talk about it because it's really important. So it's a little paranormal. Again, talking about communication. What about extrasensory perception? What about feelings? What about moving and even perceptions that you can get from feelings? And I'll tell you about the very first time I had this extremely significant paranormal. You can't even call it paranormal though, because they study ESP in psychology. I took psychology back in 2001, and it was part of the textbook readings. So this is really a part of science now. It's not just some paranormal weird subject. And anybody I talk to, everybody's had a feeling. Everybody's had, felt like somebody was watching them and looked in a particular direction. But what happens when it goes to a new level with imagery and more than feeling? And anyways, we're going to talk about that in one of my first ESP, I guess, encounters of a Sasquatch, back when I filmed video 2 and 3 right in between those 2 days. So let's get into that now. A lot of people don't know this, but when I filmed, there's two videos. My two first Sasquatch videos I personally filmed were video 2 and 3, and they were pretty famous back in 2006 when I was touring Western Canada, showing people video 3 and how significant it was. But anyways, what people don't know is between the filming of video 2 and video 3, I had a very significant encounter, and you have to understand too. My paradigm was being shocked. I was taken out by two other people, my biologist mentor from Great Falls, Montana, and a paramedic firefighter from Calgary, Alberta. They were literally leading the expedition because I was quite convinced it wasn't Sasquatch, and I was really out there to just prove that it was. I thought it was maybe a group of Native Americans and First Nations people that had elaborate costumes to scare people out of an area. And after I filmed video 2, my paradigm was shook to the core, like big time. I felt like I was in some sort of bizarro world, because to think that this primate species could exist, it's just like most people don't believe they exist. And it was really, really shocking to my paradigm. So what happened before I filmed video 3, and I'll tell you, after I filmed video 3, I took those two dudes like figuratively by the throat, and I was like, home time now, had enough. After I filmed video 3 and that Sasquatch ran that distance, and I saw that being move so fast, and I knew how far it had to run to get there, I needed to go home. It was too much. There was nothing more. I had footage. But anyways, in between, what happened that was tremendously significant, I'm just going to tell you the facts as I saw them, as it happened. So we were in a tent, again, probably a day and a half after we'd filmed video 2, and it was night, and it was so dark. There was cloud covered. I think it was just a quarter moon, and really dark clouds were over top. It was so pitch black. I remember I couldn't even see, you know those nights where you can't even see your hand in front of your face. So I couldn't tell if my eyes were open or closed, but I slowly woke up with a really strong feeling like I was seeing the tent from the outside, and I felt like an urge inside of me, like a curiosity that really didn't feel like mine, because I'm not curious about the tent. And I remember feeling, moving closer, feeling, concerned and but intrigued by the tent and the material in the tent. And I remember even actually seeing a hand come in front of my face. And again, I can't tell if my eyes are open or closed. I don't understand why I'm perceiving this. It's quite a shock to me. And I felt like the hand was coming out, and I could see the hand with the curiosity. And then with my ears, this is what really cued me to just kind of step it up, was I saw a hand touch the tent, and then I heard it. At that moment, I was in the middle of my two colleagues, and I remember kicking them both with all my might. Get up, you sons of bitches! And they woke up all shocked and rolling around, and all three of us heard a being moving bipedally. Boom, 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 boom. That was the first time I'd ever heard that. Boom, boom, boom. And I've talked about it on Survivor Man. I've talked about it in my movies. I talk about it on my expeditions when you hear it. When you hear that, that's a Sasquatch sound. And what's significant, though, is we heard the boom, 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 and we're all really paying attention. And maybe a couple crashes, a couple bits of wood breaking, and then we heard like climbing up the side of that ridge that was there, and then off in the distance, boom, 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 boom on top. What's tremendously significant about this is when we got up in the morning, and there was signs of tracks. I mean, not crystal clear signs, but breakage in the earth, because the dirt was hard packed, and there was lots of rocks in there. But as a tracker, I could identify that something had disturbed the earth in almost like a bipedal trackway, definitive like a bipedal trackway, which again was shocking my paradigm. But we all concluded tremendously. Remember how black and how pitch and how dark it was? None of us could see. We had to turn on a light in there. This being had moved this distance, and I would say, honestly, we approximated it to be about, let's say 30 seconds, less than 30 seconds. For me to run that distance that we heard took about 24 seconds. To climb that ridge that was maybe 20 meters high was not doable. It was just not doable. I was literally unable to do that without possibly really injuring myself. It was an extremely difficult rock climb. And we heard this being run through the wilderness in pitch black, hit that ridge, climb up it fast, and then hit the top of that ridge and boom, boom, boom off in 30 seconds. In my opinion, and it was agreed upon with my colleagues at the time, there's no living being that could have done that. No living being. No human could have done that. Even with special equipment, no human being could have done that. Perhaps if they had a rope over, even if a human being had a rope hanging and dangling down and was doing that in daylight, I'm significantly convinced no human being could do that. So take what you will out of that. I mean, Sasquatch are incredible, amazing. How was he moving in pitch black like that? What the hell was going on in my head where I could actually see that a hand touch? And what's intriguing to me as I've rethought about that experience many times is it felt like a Sasquatch wanted to touch the tent and feel how that tent felt. And this is tactile, not tactile communication, but it's tactile. It's a need to touch. It's that need to feel things. And as my research has gone on over the years, I don't believe that this species has that touchy, feely need at all. And it was amazing that really within the first few days of me ever having an understanding and eyewitnessing and accounting and video footage of this species, it was that tactile, that touching of the tent that it's one of the first things I experienced, and I've never really seen it since. So very interesting stuff. So we'll get into the science next. I want to talk about the significance of vocalization and some stuff that's really important to know about primates and things that we need to know in dealing with this particular primate species. That's up next. Stay tuned. A theory I've been clinging to, in that Sasquatch are beings that live in groups and move together in groups and are devoted to one another, is the fact that, again, gorillas and chimpanzees and baboons and most primate species that live in groups primates are highly physical beings, highly touchy-feely, and that leads to significant bonding between individuals. So, but getting away from the tactile subject, what I want to talk about in the science of things is vocalizations. The first step in communication that you'll ever, the longest distance any primate species can communicate is through vocalizations. And it's not just vocalizations. It's sounds and tree breaks and breaking of trees. And in the beginning, I believe, as I've learned more about Sasquatch, and I've been to different research sites in different areas all across North America, it seems to me that they use vocalizations in the beginning to test you, to test how. A lot of people will hear a tree break and not care. A lot of people will hear the boom, boom, boom and never give a second thought. And I think that really, I don't mean to be rude, but I think that really shows the ignorance of that particular individual, where, again, we live in civilization and we hear trains, we hear buses. Right now I've got a heater blowing and a computer, and my light buzzes. When I was out with infrared lights in the wilderness, they seem fine and great. When I turn the damn thing on, what I didn't notice was it goes, and it doesn't seem loud when you're in civilization, when you're in a house, when you got cars driving by and all the stuff that we have to deal with. But when you're out in the wilderness, sounds are extremely important. And as I said earlier, species don't just, if a deer hears a sound, man, he freezes and he looks and he does not ever quit on that sound until he knows it's safe 100%, or he'll back away and leave. I mean, these animals, they live and die based on their auditory abilities. So when a Sasquatch comes around, and again, in this discovery process, it's quite clear to me that they're just, for lack of a better term, testing your mettle, seeing what you're made of, seeing what you tolerate. And it'll start with vocalizations 100%. If you're lucky enough to get a sighting, I mean, how long has that Sasquatch been around? That's something I always ask people, How long was that Sasquatch watching you? Maybe the Sasquatch was trying to get your attention with signs and breaks and sounds, and you just weren't getting it. And I think, for the most part, most people are like that. Most people just don't get it. And it must be frustrating for them to attempt to communicate with us, because we are so ignorant and our sensory perceptions are so poor. How often will people actually pick up the scent of a Sasquatch. When a Sasquatch is definitively giving you the wind gauge and letting him know that you're there, how far away can he be? Because I'll tell you, a wild animal, they'll detect a scent kilometers away, miles away. And human beings are incapable of doing that. So, you know, it must be frustrating for a Sasquatch to try to communicate with us at distance, which is what you would expect from a species like this that's very shy and highly perceptive to its surroundings. So communicating with us is very difficult and very frustrating for them. But always, you know, when you're out in the wilderness doing things, learn your sounds to start, because sometimes it is just a squirrel dropping an acorn. Sometimes it is a deer running, and those sounds, once you practice it, become very vividly obvious to you. And to a Sasquatch, the sounds they make are completely original and not something that a bear or an elk or any other animal will do. So, you know, when you get your metal tested, if you're out there and you're working on this discovery process, really, and again, don't try to make every sound out to be Sasquatch. I know I get accused of that with Survivor Man a lot when I worked with him, but I don't mind, because, you know, I do know the sounds, and I do know the sounds of Sasquatch. And to Les, it was like, well, Todd seems to hear Sasquatch a lot. Well, but that's why I took him out there. And remember, on every episode of Survivor Man, Les Stroud either live interacted with or filmed in the last episode, the top of the head of a Sasquatch, and we found significant signs. So my argument to the con to what Les was saying about me seeing Sasquatch everywhere is, I took him in a Sasquatch habitat. Those were Sasquatch tracks, and I proved it by having him live interact with these beings. And you know, to get to that point, to get to that, the research to get to that it took to get to that successful area was significant. It took me years, sometimes, you know, nearly a decade, to be able to go into a place and have that kind of success with a Sasquatch. So that's why I get such good success with my expeditions. I'm literally like one of those guerrilla trackers who takes people out to a troop that he's habituated to his presence, a troop that he's studied and he's known for 8 years. That's what it takes to habituate a troop of guerrillas to a human being. 8 years. And that's 8 years of ongoing, over and over, day after day. And I don't know that too many people have had that ability to do that with Sasquatch. And if they have, and if they're out there, they're keeping it secret for the most part. So very interesting stuff. So next we're going to go into a video that's wow, I don't know what to say about it. We'll have a look at it. I know people have their opinions. Let's try to be nice and respectful. This is a lady from Pennsylvania sent me this footage, and we'll get into that next. So let's have a look at that now. Here we go with the Pennsylvania Sasquatch potential video. So you can see a lady filming a beautiful buck here. She's framing him appropriately, maybe a little off on her framing until he turns to the side and gives us a nice side profile. So she framed the deer decently. Now, if you watch up in the horns area, as soon as this deer picks up his head, you'll see a shadow movement on the top, and then clearly something moving that looks like it's slightly leaning forward, and then it moves off to the top right. We'll zoom in a little more, have a closer look. So keep an eye on, so this is the full length video. There it is on the top. This is in proper motion. Looks like there's some fur, looks like a really wide waist, and he moves off into the shadows over there. Not clear video, but very interesting. This is in slow motion now. Let's have a good hard look. I'm seeing a little bit of a leaning forward, potentially swinging wide arms, really wide in the midsection, which I've never seen before, and you know, very obscure as the video ends and she pulls away from it. But a little bit of shimmer in the sunlight. Here we go again one more time. So I'll let you all decide for yourself. I'd love to hear your comments below. Perhaps we'll discuss this video a little more, but this is a Pennsylvania Sasquatch filmed by a very nice lady from the state of Pennsylvania. Her husband thinks it's a man. What do you think? Comments below. I'd love to hear it.